Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Exiger Nexus. Again, today we have Brandon Daniels, Carrie Wibben, and Matt Hayden to talk about the intersection of economic and national security and sort of what we're seeing in the news. And this week it's been a busy one. So much coming out of the White House on corruption, cyber, new executive orders, regulation, and then all these cyber attacks. So every day, it almost seems hard to keep up. There's another cyber attack. Most recently, the JBS cyber attack. Matt, maybe you can give us a bit more on what this hack is to kind of kick us off, and what happened. Is it the same as Colonial Pipeline, SolarWinds, these other big ones we've seen in the news? What's different, and what does it mean for companies and organizations?
Happy to. So the closest companion we have for the meatpacking situation with JBS is Colonial. We're talking about a ransomware situation in which we had some level of backdoor opened and encryption applied to their systems that locked them out and kept them from being able to do their day-to-day functions. This would be something that occurs on businesses around the world. We're seeing ransomware as a scourge on everyone's networks. Comparing it to SolarWinds is a little bit different, but it still has the same feel because supply chains are just as important. Ransomware can come through your source and partner networks just as it can through your own front door. And so getting that hygiene in place is key. So much so that we saw an unprecedented event this week in which Ann Neuberger, with it leading the cybersecurity efforts up at the White House, sent out a direct letter to industry saying, you've got to do backups. You've got to do better on your security level. You've got to do encryption. And all of us are in this together. And so there is a renewed focus here. At the same time, they're going to be looking at what diplomatic options we have for when these ransomware operators get defined. What can we do about it if they're harboring in countries that may end in a series of letters that we don't agree with politically? So that's where we are today. It's going to take a big effort by both government and industry to get on the same page of leveling that playing field and taking care of a few of our weakest links.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I would just say, I think to me, we've seen enough now, and those of us who certainly come from the intelligence community, we're usually pretty good at zooming out and looking for trend lines as it relates to adversarial behavior. So, thinking about what happened this week with, an attack on our food supply, the ransomware attacks, I think the trend line is actually pretty clear. If you just step back, zoom out, and look at the macro picture here, we've seen, I think it deserves some discussion. We've seen our adversaries attack our government agencies, and with SolarWinds, our fuel supply with Colonial, our water supply, numerous ransomware attacks. I think there was a Florida City water supply attack, cyber attack. Our healthcare medical infrastructure with numerous hospital attacks, ransomware attacks, and now our food supply with JBS. So I don't know. I think we should ask ourselves what's next. I'm sure that the CISA and other federal organizations, and I know the intel community is absolutely asking themselves what's likely next. Is it our logistics supply chains? Is it our U.S. bulk power system? I know the FBI, a couple reports that I've seen, they really, I think, are particularly concerned with ransomware hitting more of our healthcare providers and hospitals and even, first responders, 9/11 first responders, because those types of attacks obviously can very easily impact, the physical safety of Americans. So I'm just curious that Brandon and Matt, if you have any thoughts on, what do you think is next, and where should we be, really starting to be a little more anticipatory on what likely is the next large target by our adversaries from a ransomware attack standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie, one of the things that we saw as we've been doing work for the government is that, we have reliance, I think an uncomfortable and untenable reliance on near peer adversaries in our critical infrastructure. And we've quite literally seen those transformers from what we know are adversarial, nation state actors come over and get installed in major components of our grid. We've seen the goods records that are published on, import and export shipping records, right? So we know that it's there. The other thing is, don't doubt that ransomware attacks or hacks have already happened in healthcare, have already happened in the bulk power sector. And one, they may not have been reported because in some sectors you don't have to report.
Yeah.
And in certain situations you don't have to report, right? And then I think don't doubt that, they're lying in wait right now, right? And so there's a bit of this where, not just saying, okay, you guys kind of got to get after this problem in the future. I think there needs to be a more robust response and surveillance of what's already in place today in order to proactively mitigate potential risks. And I think we need to take the playbook that we've seen in these last few hacks and kind of regress that into new security review procedures, right? I know that there has been a lot of wrangling over CMMC, which is going to be deployed and is going to impact the defense community and really writ large the community of industries that support the defense community. I know that there are increased standards that the president put out in the EO for cybersecurity reform. I think that there are these things that are being put in place that are going to help us to get after this problem. But I think without these continued examples of issues, it's hard to get these major reforms through, right? And, unfortunately, we know that there are latent problems. We know that there are problems that have happened and haven't been reported. And, we just need people to take these incidents as a call to action to recognize that cybersecurity is a core component of doing business, just like well-managed financial accounts, just like not reporting, fraudulent earnings is critical to the resiliency of our industrial infrastructure. Cybersecurity is that same thing. Everybody needs good hygiene. And so where do I think it's going next? I think it's already happened in healthcare. I think it's already happening in our bulk power sector. I think we may not have felt the reverberations of the quake that has already occurred, but we will. And the only way to mitigate that, and the only way that we won't see that in the future, is if we start to do cybersecurity differently now. And if we start to upgrade those legacy systems, like Matt said last time, right? Upgrade or move back into the secure infrastructure, those systems that are critical, that you can't function without, right? If you have to stay on a legacy version because moving to a better patched version will create an issue for you, move that away from the external infrastructure, harden everything around it, mitigate the rest of the risk that sits around that infrastructure, sits around those systems, sits around those programs. Yeah. So when you ask what's next, I think it's kind of like that situation where, it's already happened, but it's in a box. We can't see through the box. As soon as the box is lifted, we'll realize it's all in there. It's already all done, right? Yeah. And so before we lift that box top off, we've got to put, an explosion containment unit around it to make sure we don't feel that reverberation even further than it needs to be.
Well, one of the things I would add is that the challenge we have normally is getting CEOs to budget for cybersecurity and take it seriously. We always hear, take it seriously. You apply the risk, it goes into a formula, and it goes to the side. It is a risk. We're putting money towards it, but we're not putting everything the CIO or CISO says they need. Now CEOs feel targeted because they are. Before, there was a hands-off on critical infrastructure policy that even the den of thieves didn't go after. And now we're seeing pushes from nation states. We're seeing incorporated business units from this criminal enterprise taking on critical infrastructure. And that means that if they're not safe, no one is safe. And so that bullseye has moved into every C-suite and boardroom in the country. And now they're asking those questions about, is our setup good to go? And are our partner setups good to go? And how do we know that and prove it? And what are we going to do when we get hit? How are we going to respond to the media inquiries? And what are we going to do to get our systems back online as quick as possible? Or do we have the tools to even know that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, that awareness is occurring, and it's really, I'm sure, a very, daunting thing to face for these CEOs. I do worry a little bit. Matt, you mentioned the Whitehouse Memo, the Ian Neuberger Memo. As I looked at that, and I kind of compared it to, okay, the things that they're saying in this memo the White House is putting out, what do they essentially align to from a CMMC level perspective? And it's really, I think, pretty close to level 1. And that concerns me, because I don't think that's nearly good enough, right? I think level 3 has to be the focus, has to be where the lowest bar is set, in my opinion. And so, I hope that we continue to see more aggressive pushes from the White House, from the Department of Defense, to really continue to strengthen and increase and really raise that bar to more of that CMMC level 3 set of requirements. Because I think anything short, I just wonder, is the juice even worth the squeeze? Does it actually even make a difference?
Well, I'll tell you from a backup perspective, it does. Right now, when you're finding people that don't even have offsite backups, they have no choice but to look at ransom options. And just that level of security that's outlined in what we would think of as below the baseline is still not being adhered to across the country. And so that's where they're trying to level that playing field, at least to the baseline floor, so that they can get people at least in a position where they're saying, where's your backup? And they have to at least know where it is.
Yeah.
I wonder if all my old backup tape knowledge will come back into vogue. I mean, remember those big backup tapes? I mean, I used to know everything about splicing them together and server volumes. I've forgotten it all, but if they come back in vogue, my number is, no, I'm kidding. But
the future is now. What I'm hearing from all of you is that these things that you're saying, what if it did, it kind of already did. And including the backup tape thing is pretty cool right now. It's nostalgia is big. I want to pull up one thing that Carrie sent me earlier, just to look this up. And we've got, sorry for my desktop, we've got this stat here. Now, I hear what you guys are all saying. I hear that, CEOs are under fire because, they think they are and they actually are. So I'd love to hear kind of rapid fire from this group. You're a CEO, what do you need to do? And in the context of, look at this, this is nuts to me when I looked at this. So, in the context of this big stat, what do you do, CEO? What are you guys advising clients to do right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I sent this, Cody. To me, it's sort of, really hits at the focus of our little Nexus thing we're doing here, where it starts to really translate, things that we know have a huge national security impact, these attacks, and what does it mean from an economic security standpoint, right? So, this is a chart. I think it came out last year. It's been updated, but this tells that story, and wow, what an eye-opener. And I think this is the reality that we are facing. When you start to see, the predictions that there will be a ransomware attack on businesses every 11 seconds in 2021, this year, up from every 40 seconds in 2016, and then trending towards every 2 seconds in 2031, and then the economic impact from a damage cost standpoint. This is just so alarming and eye-opening when you see it kind of put together, based on real data and events that are actually occurring and being proved out, and these types of forecasts. This is where we need to be, how do we get, again, from this very reactive posture that I feel like we've been in for way too long, and start opening our eyes to the right now and the near future, and then the not too distant future. So I welcome others' thoughts, but that's really what hit me with this chart that I saw.
The first thing I would say is, what are the techniques? If I'm a CEO and I'm seeing these others in the news, I'm going to ask what they did wrong. And what are we going to do to make sure we don't make that same mistake? So we're learning from others. And the first thing that we're going to hear from cyber agencies like CISA and NSA are the prioritized techniques that people are using to get in. And one of them is spear phishing. That's where they're tricking your employees into clicking on links and giving their credentials out. And that's still the biggest front door for these ransomware operators. And so we have a training exercise that all of us have gotten from HR on how to secure your workstation that we're needing to take serious what our credentials really are. But from a CEO level, they're going to have to weigh in and say, I took that security training and it's important. Your password is our business bottom line. This is the level of a security culture that's got to come from the tip top of every organization, to where they're saying it's not just an add-on, it's not a bolt-on. Security is our culture, no matter what we do, whether we're in the pipeline business or in JBS's world. This is the new normal.
Yeah, I mean, what this reminds me of, and I think I hadn't seen this before. This is really interesting. What this reminds me of is the gravity and the size of credit card fraud, right? And just think of the billions that is spent on credit card fraud management. Not just credit card, but now debit card, credit card, account insurance. Think of the hundreds of billions that are spent, by organizations, companies, federal government, insurers like the FDIC. There has been an incredible investment that's been made in helping to reduce fraudulent activity, right? And to catch it right when it happens. And I think that kind of investment in our global cyber infrastructure is the kind of thing we're looking at, right? We're looking at companies spending, tens of billions a year, hundreds of billions across, our global economy to avoid this kind of criminal activity disrupting our industrial base. Because Carrie, the one thing that struck me about this is I said 265 billion isn't that much, but that's just the ransom.
That's right.
Forget the 100 times that in disruption and fear and supply issues that creates.
Yeah. And then think what our adversaries will do with that 265 billion in terms of making, that a return on that investment and continuing to drive sophistication.
Yeah, you could build the F-35 a few times over with it. Yeah, so it is an astounding issue, and I'm glad we focused on this in this Nexus. I think it's important for people to understand that you just can't let the natural corporate short-term memory set in on this one. And I promise you, the cyber criminals and mercenaries won't let us do it. Near peer adversaries won't let us do it. They're going to keep reminding us whether we like it or not. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, this has been really informative. People ask me today, what's the topic of Nexus today? What are we covering? And I said it's what the biggest thing is this week and what our clients are talking about. And I think this is a great case in point on focusing in on a topic that really matters to everybody. But with that said, please, if you're listening, let us know what you want to hear about. We're happy to cover, all sorts of different topics that are important to you. And thank you to Brandon, Carrie, and Matt for another great session. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cody.